Oh, I am absolutely humbled and proud to be here with you this morning. Good morning, my brothers and sisters. I love the word brothers and sisters because it goes beyond any particular ties that we may have in family, but it creates another branch, a much larger branch that has incredible emotions built right into it. And those emotions are emotions that come out of struggling together, working together, learning together, and growing together. And that's essential. It's an essential part of this extraordinary experience of being human beings. And as we develop and grow and begin to fill our hearts with those possibilities which can recreate our world and also redefine our purpose as a human being, that's where we reside and live as brothers and sisters. So thank you once again, brothers and sisters. I want to really acknowledge the dais here. Many of the faces I see here are faces that I've seen along the way, along our common path, along our common journey. And I want to acknowledge everyone, including Cinda Estrada here, also Rich Feldman here, who lobbied for me to come here and to be with you this morning. And you, those faces that I saw at the bargaining conference where I received that prestigious award that so many others had received before me. But we are here today, right now, with a lot of work to do. This convention of workers, of mainline workers, of workers who do the work not only on the job, but do the work in their communities as well, is the substance of what we have to talk about and what we have to be about. How do we now translate the work that we do on our jobs and translate that work to another level, a higher level in our communities? And I emphasize the word communities because what community means is something else that is extraordinary in the sense that it marries the two things, brothers and sisters, while at the same time making a commitment to cooperation, making a commitment to sharing stories, and making a commitment to transformation. That's what community means. It always has. From the very point in time that we begin this journey, thousands and thousands of years ago, it's been, in essence, the journey to build and to see further and to go further. And that does not happen without community. The idea that we have this extraordinary possibility of reimagining ourselves, of redefining ourselves in life, is what community is about. I've been fortunate and blessed in my life in so many ways, beginning with my parents, both of them coming from diverse histories, one from the Deep South, the other from the Midwest, the other one grew up in poverty and was challenged to go to school and finish college. The other one, my father, coming from a situation where he was in the midst of growing changes that were happening in the Midwest where he was born. They meet, they marry, they decide to settle in San Francisco, not go back to the world that they had both known and felt comfortable with, but settle in San Francisco, and there emerge and define themselves in relationship to another community and another story. Not abandoning the stories that brought them into their womanhood and motherhood and manhood, but finding a new story. And that story grounded itself and centered itself in a union of postal workers. When the demographics of the Postal Service were changing so fast that new voices were here in front of them, new ideas were in front of them, new possibilities were in front of them. And within that, they began to search and uncover their community. That community began out in the workplace, but in a movement where different change, where massive change was happening in this country, that community was servicing also the needs of not only what happens in the workplace, but what happens in the schools. Not only what happens in the workplace, but what happens in our churches. Not only in the workplace, but what happens on the streets in the community as well. Those are the kind of things that happen. As extraordinary as it was, for some reason they found community for me living in the housing projects in the Boys Club, or in the Boy Scouts, or in the Cub Scouts. Those are the kind of ways in which they would engage community in their early days. And with those, certain ideals that went beyond just their personal life, but went beyond in building character and building relationships and having a sense of accomplishment and a sense also of entitlement, a sense of larger expectations. We are on the brink where we need relationships that give us the sense that we can be much bigger than we have before. We can be much gracious than we have before. We can work harder in building relations than we had before. We're at that possibility, and we're in desperate need of it. I didn't say anything about how our lives are affected economically, because we know that. Our story, that story is no different here at this moment in Nashville than it is in other places in the rest of the country. But in that meaning right there, as we find our capacity as earners diminishing, as we find our capacity within our communities diminishing, we have to find different ways in which we can elevate that. And as Grace Boggs says, in a sense, elevate and grow our souls. Where's the next frontier? Is the next frontier in how much we can consume and how much we can get? Is the next frontier in that? Is the next frontier perhaps in sharing and growing and evolving? Is that the next frontier? If that's the next frontier, we ask the basic question that philosophers have asked for thousands and thousands of years. What does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to serve community? What does it mean to develop relationships? Those are the places where we have to go. Because we can't keep destroying the best of us and the best thing about us. And the best thing about us, is Dr. King would say, is the capacity to love. The best thing about us is the capacity to change, the capacity to struggle, the capacity to ask more of ourselves. In asking more of ourselves and demanding more of ourselves, we also demand more of those who situate themselves in the power of governance as well. So we can't ask more of them if we don't ask more of ourselves. We can't ask them to be transformative unless we be transformative ourselves. In that sense, we begin to build the models that ensure that we're able and capable of passing down the mantle to the next generation. What do we have to do as union workers right now? Right now, yes, we have to ensure that we protect those rights that so historically we fought for. Yes, we have to ensure that. We have to ensure that the standards of living that we have learned to maintain and we have fought so hard to gain remain high. We have to remember that too. But we have to, in some sense, service the much larger need. And that much larger need is the capacity to grow and to flourish and to love. That's what the much larger need is. That much larger need is redefined even within the union itself, even within this sacred place. And I call the place the sacred place, this union. We have to also learn the capacity and grow in the capacity of extending those words, brothers and sisters. You hear what I'm saying, brothers and sisters? You know what I'm saying? This is what we're talking about. You know, this is what we're talking about. We've gone on a long journey, and yet we have so much to do and so much work to do. Take this moment right here, to just gather your energy, to know that we're in the right place at the right time. We're in the right place at the right time. Whatever we think the hardships are, whatever we think the difficulties are, we are in a position to make transformative change in our own lives and translating that lives to our community. And the emphasis cannot be misunderstood when I say community. And that community stretches to our relationship, gender. A community stretches in relationship to our damaged environment. The community that exists in creating the kind of beloved community that Dr. King talked about. These are the things that move me. These are the things that brought me here this morning. Even despite, as I open the paper, I see and read about the tragedies that happen in those communities, the tragedies that happen, the loss of life that happened in a place like Oakland just yesterday. Even as I open the paper and read that, I know that we have that strong will and capacity to overcome that, to be larger than that, to redefine our lives and redefine us in a different way. Those moments, while tragedies, become moments of possibility as well. So as we embark on this conference here in 2012, and the world is not going to end at the end of the year. You know, it's not. No, I don't care what the Mayan candles say. Understand the work that we have to do. Also understand that I'm your brother in struggle with you. I celebrated my 60th birthday with laundry workers in Chicago. It was one of the most amazing moments as I marked a point in my life 5 years ago at 60 years old at a conference. I've been able to go in the workplaces, in hotels, right in laundry rooms, in the bowels of the hotels, or the cafeteria where workers gather to eat lunch and converse. I've had the opportunity there, and I call it opportunity. Or march on picket lines, or sit in the home of union workers as they discuss what happens on that job. And in the home places us in the community directly dealing with not only the issues of the workplace, but dealing with the issues surrounding the communities. What happens in our school becomes what part of our mentality. I want to commend you from UAW for the enormous support that you gave to the Catherine Ferguson Academy. You know, incredible support by that. So there you are, right there. You took the workplace to the community. A clear example of how we build bridges, and how we build relationships, and how we really elevate that whole spirit of who we are as human beings. Clear example, but there are others as well. I've been many times, many times, and we'll go many times more to Detroit to watch the work that men and women are doing in terms of restorative justice. Men and women, young and old, are doing in terms of the violence that happens with our young people. And men and women finding new ways in which they could talk about food and the security of food security and growing their own food. From there to setting up small businesses which are engaged in community. The business itself is not separate from the community. It's a part of the community. Watching those businesses prosper and grow, and watching us find new ways in which we care about each other, and in other ways in which we grow our souls. That becomes our time right now. It's ironic that Dr. King talked about it more than 40 years ago when he says in his last novel, his last book rather, not novel, but last book, where do we go from here? Community or chaos? Our question is pivotal right this moment. Where do we go from here? Community or chaos? Say that. Where do we go from here? Community or chaos? And every one of us knows that in order to get to that place, that new place, that high place, we have to go community. It's there for us. But it's going to take as much work, hard work. It's going to take hard work. It's going to take painful work. It's going to take growing work, but it's going to take the work of love. It's going to take the work of love. And you do that every day. Every day. Thank you, and keep up the work. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to take a few minutes. Danny and I are going to come down here, and we wanted to ask him a few questions about the work that he does. And while we're moving down there, we're going to show a short video of Danny talked about the Catherine Ferguson School and the role that the UAW played along with community in saving that school in the city of Detroit for these young women. So we're going to play that.
In Detroit that's on the hit list to get closed is getting the attention of the UAW and a famous Hollywood actor. Some students say the Catherine Ferguson Academy changed their lives. Action News reporter Tara Edwards has the story from Detroit's west side. Holding signs and chanting together, a large crowd gathered outside the Catherine Ferguson Academy earlier today. For many teenage moms, the school has been a home away from home.
If we have problems at home, we have people to talk to us. The teachers are actually teaching us something to help us in the future. They have CNA classes, and people get jobs, and it's just a very helpful school for everybody.
This rally scheduled when protesters thought the school would close, but things turned from a protest to a victory celebration after the crowd got word the school would remain open. At a press conference, the Detroit Public Schools emergency manager made the announcement it will become a charter school.
That we can stay open, and I so appreciate your coming. Thank you so much. We will have a school in the fall. We will hopefully have a school for as long as...
Featured speaker actor Danny Glover. The vitality of public schools, a big issue for him.
The question is how do we now bridge that, create the bridge
create the bridge, that we talk about education as a right, not an entitlement, a right. Not entitled to a few people, a right, because where do we go from here?
And many of the people that we spoke to out here protesting say that they see the school staying open as a minor victory. They'd like to see it stay public and not turn into a charter school. On Detroit's West Side, Tara Edwards, Channel 7 Action News.
Thank you, Danny. That was a very important action, I felt, for the UAW. One of the things we heard out in that protest was people saying, it's so good to see the UAW, it's so good to see the UAW. And it really dawned on me at that time that while we've always been a union of social justice, people weren't seeing it in the communities. So I think, and it energized the members, and I think the UAW played a big role along with the community in keeping that school open.
Well, historically, the UAW has played a role in many struggles. We can think about just most recently within our own lifetime, the fight against apartheid and the role the UAW and the former president played in that role, and relationships developed out there. I mean, the role of unions, and I say specifically the UAW, because the role that UAW played during the civil rights movement, you know. Dr. King expressed the importance of engaging unions and using some of the models of resistance that movements the unions had developed over years and years and decades of struggling for workers' rights, So I think that the UAW is poised and always been poised to be able to be have this as part of the central focus, that of community.
You know, since I've been meeting with Grace Boggs, I've met her a couple years ago, and she talked to me a lot about how the UAW is poised and so much potential to tap into, continue, especially now at these times when they're even more difficult, at least in my lifetime that I've seen. And what I'm interested in knowing, I was so moved by Grace Boggs. She challenges me every day to go beyond, you know, just to challenge me to think differently about the world. I'd be interested in knowing, when did you meet her and what have you learned from her?
Well, I met Grace Boggs about 15 years ago at a retreat for activists in Santa Cruz. And she was there with a great friend of mine and unions and the movement, Vincent Hardy. He was also there. Okay. So I had a chance to meet Grace then. And I didn't know a great deal about Grace Boggs or Jimmy Lee Boggs before then, you know. And yet that impression was so powerful that whenever I had an opportunity to go to Detroit and literally sit at her feet and have her instruct me, I took that opportunity to do that.
I sit at her feet too. So she has this, you know, I use this in for the last year in every talk I give, because, you know, one of the things my mom always taught me is that the most difficult times challenge us. They may be difficult, but we're going to learn from it. It's a time for us. It might be painful, but we're going to come out of it stronger. I remember her telling me personal things when my brother passed away, to social causes. And Grace, that's what struck me about her, grow your souls, right?
Yeah, definitely growing your soul.
What do you mean? What do you think she means by that?
Well, I think in growing our souls, and I kind of mentioned that, where is the last frontier for us? We've reached the point in our growth as in technology beyond anything imaginable, beyond perhaps more technology than we actually need. But at what expense? What expense has that had on our connection as a community? And only within the reference of community are we capable of growing our souls and to its full potential. I believe that. It happens within the union itself. Even though we don't often acknowledge it, we find ourselves growing. Imagine the capacity that happens once you're involved in a union. Look at the things that you often think about, not only that take place at the workplace, but outside of that. The union itself politicizes us in a way. Does it often politicize us in a way that we always understand what our full potential is as human beings? No, no place. So we're going to have to take that next step. I think the next step beyond the wars and the conflicts and the struggles that we have is the struggle with ourselves, the struggle with who we can be, potentially be as human beings. And that's the struggle that we still have to wage. And within that framework, I think we find the answers ourselves. The answers about what does it mean to grow our soul? And the same questions that I posed before, and it's been posed many times. What does it mean to be a human being? Within that framework of what does it mean to be a human being is also what does it mean to grow our souls? What it means to give. What it means to give, to create what Dr. King often referred to is this beloved community. And that's not just words. Right. They're not passive words. Beloved is not a passive word. Love is not a passive word. It's an active word. And growing our soul is an active activity. It's a plan, it's an activity that has defeats, victories. It's an activity that leaves us not unaware of where we are, but it's a necessary activity for us at this stage in our human development. If we don't, then what we stand the risk of doing is destroying us ourselves as human beings. And I say that, and meaning, when you hear the word destroy, you often draw fear. But I'm not talking about the fear of annihilating ourselves. I'm talking about the greater fear of destroying that very special connections that makes us different than any species on the planet. That's what I'm talking about. Growing our souls is what we have to do as opposed to killing our souls.
Wow. You know, one of the things we've been talking a little bit, touched on, Bob King was here on Monday, and we had a couple speakers. One of the things, I have two 8-year-old boys, and you know, I look at them, and part to me of what I figured out with growing my soul is that I can't no longer just look at my family, right, or my people. And I think I grew up in a time where it was, you know, of course it's your immediate family, but your family beyond that. So, you know, talking about what does it mean as a country to have 46 million people in poverty? What does that mean when we sit down and negotiate with companies, and in order to protect our own wages, we might negotiate a second tier that means workers are actually making $10, $11 an hour. So they can't take care of their family, they can't do, you know, and then it separates us from another group of people. And so what advice would you give, because everyone here clearly is here because they want the opportunity to grow their souls, to reach out to community, but now we're asking them to go back to their membership, right? And it is it's a personal journey to grow your soul, but what is it that they can say to their membership to get them to stop looking at just their life, right? Because sometimes, you know, we used to live and work in the same place. Now we drive to work. So for example, in Highland Park, most of the people who work in an assembly plant in Highland Park drive into the plant. The community is devastated, but they can drive out to their middle class lifestyle. How do we change that to get them to look at that is their community, that is their world? I know there's no one answer to that, but what's a way to start engaging our membership on that?
I think the way that we engage the membership on that is to step beyond their own comfort zone. We become comfortable even though we are struggling, night and day, 24/7, to retain what we have, we become comfortable. And how do we step out of that comfort zone? It's because we make a choice of what we want to see. The whole idea of we can be blind to what we see right in front of our face. The choice that we have to make, and the choice that all of us have to make, is to go beyond what we feel safe in watching and seeing and understanding. And in a sense, that also means growing our souls. So that's the challenge. And these are all challenges, because you're asking, you're saying, what do I do? How do I change the life of that person who probably makes $11 an hour, and at the same time I make twice as much? How do I change that? How do I impact that life? That's not perhaps within your capacity to do that. Within the capacity to do that is to kind of find ways in which you support and advocate on their behalf on the one hand, but at the same time, while having the word compassion for that person, everything, understanding that the way you build community is not through competition. The way you build community is through cooperation. The way you build bridges is through cooperation. So those are the kind of things, and those are specific to each particular community. Every single person in this room has a way in which they can absolutely acknowledge what they've struggled for, but at the same time find ways in which you improve the conditions, help improve the conditions of others. And that's improving the conditions of others, first of all, is by acknowledging and caring.
Thank you, Danny. Now, to change a little, you've heard of 99% Spring, right? Where many coalitions are coming together to have these days of action. And one thing that I've often heard, a lot of members in the room have been involved in the labor movement for a long time, struggled with getting other people in the community to see the issues, like why it's so important to fight for health care, why it's so important to fight for good jobs, why it's so important to fight for public education. And what was so exciting was to see Occupy Wall Street take place. All these young people coming together, people outside of the labor movement, young, old, different ethnic backgrounds, but specifically the young. So we had some members go to a 99% spring training. I don't know if anybody's in the room today that went to one. And some of the feedback that we got back was union members coming in with these young college students, and culturally very different. And so I got the sense, and for those that went, correct me if I'm wrong, I can see you nod your head, there was a sense of, who are these young people coming in? We've been fighting for this for 40, 50 years, and now here comes these young people, and they're going to tell us the way, they're not even wearing shoes. And I said, well, because I struggle with that as a union member too. It's like, God, we've been fighting this for so long. But I said, but whatever they did with Occupy Wall Street, finally we're talking about the 99%. Finally we're coming together. We're getting national attention. But what would be your advice to the member about the importance of these young people getting involved in the movement?
I tell you, it's sometimes difficult. When you've been out there, many of you have been out there on the front lines, years and years and years. And then you see all of the attention and all the press going to a group of who you consider as upstarts, who don't know, who've not been in the bowels of the struggle itself, but have decided that they've lost their own privilege and are out here for the most part. And that's the way some people considered Occupy, the Occupy movement. Mm-hmm. But in the Occupied movement, it gave us a really great platform for understanding just how vast the issue is. That we get isolated sometimes in our own story and not understand how it affects even those who we had considered in the past to be privileged in some sense, and find out that the privileges that they may have assumed they had, or we thought they had, are not quite the story that it really is. And some of those students who are coming out of college and labored in college
saddled with loans that they're incapable of paying back, and that there's no opportunity to have a job and no opportunity to pay them back. And those are real issues as they themselves become indebted for what they saw as a future. All of it seems out of focus to some extent. But the thing that I think is most important for us to understand is that within the context of this struggle that we have, we're going to find new partners. We're going to find that our struggle has a common ground with others, that our struggle in community remains the same. That in community we find that our common struggle leads to common stories, leads to common alliances, and leads to a sense that we're in the boat together. And that's important to understand. I don't want to kind of belittle the Occupy movement and not criticize it for many of the reasons that we can criticize it. It certainly marked a moment, right, and an important moment in this evolution, this process that's going on. And it's unique to not only here, but it finds itself resonating in different other ways. How is the Occupy movement tied to the Arab Spring that we heard so much about, right, in the fall, in the spring, as we led up to the Occupy movement? All these are connected into the world. So it's a worldwide phenomena. The phenomena that's happening with us, the phenomena that has squeezed working people, that has held them hostage and continues to hold them hostage, is a worldwide phenomena. We have to recognize that. And as we build these partnerships and build community, we consider that as well. Little do we know that there are men and women and families that are facing really incredible challenges, environmental challenges. They could sign themselves as environmental refugees. That means that simply the environment is turned to such a degree that it has pushed them off their land, pushed them where they have an opportunity to grow their food, and now they're found in this precarious situation where they're on the verge of dying, basically. And what happens to that sense of community when this happens as well? And we can identify that in our own lives in various ways. Right. The collapse and breakup of community, disintegration of community, et cetera, et cetera. But what if everything is taken away from you in that sense? But I think it's important for us to really focus on this as part of an opportunity. And always when we find that we see these incredible moments where something special is happening, it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity, in essence, as Grace says, grow our souls in a different other way. Now, does Occupy Wall Street mean the beginning of something new? Not necessarily. It certainly is the continuation of all the struggles that we've, on the front line, have been waging for years and years and years. And those are part of the struggles that those who preceded us have been waging for years and years and years and years. That's what it simply means. But we've identified another source. And not the boogeyman, but another source. But it still doesn't absolve us of the responsibility that we have to now find and search in a very holistic way, in a very profound way, those questions of not only what does democracy mean, what does community mean, what does mean growing our souls, a different way of looking at it.
You know what? We were talking the other day, and I think what's so important about, you know, the excitement around Obama and all of us turning out, and he got elected overwhelmingly, but then we stepped back. And to me, I do think things happen for a reason. I think that needed to happen to show us that what does democracy look like? It doesn't just look like showing up to the polls to vote on one day. And we know how to do that in the union. I was talking with our retired Vice President Carolyn Forrest and Owen. We've done that a lot. We show up, our members see us come to them during time to vote, and then we step back. And I think this is an opportunity that everyone's learned from, that democracy, you know, part of democracy is continuing to engage in your community, continuing to engage in the fight. And then it's exciting to see finally, I think people are getting so angry. You see HB 56 in Alabama and all of these issues around immigration and trying to incite that hate, and people starting to see, just like we did when Walter formed the union or with a number of workers, is that it's when we come together. It's when we come together regardless of ethnicity, regardless of gender, and we start to move together, and that's another way that people start, to grow their souls.
Well, I think, I mean, Owen was right there at the center doing the anti-apartheid movement. Mm-hmm. And there's many members and many of the officers of this union.
Yeah.
And supported that movement. And in some ways, it was their responsibility to support that movement. Certainly the outcome of having Mandela as elected president and a new democracy emerges out of that is the high point of that movement. But that movement has its own evolution, right, and own transformation that it has to go through, and it's still yet to do that. And we all realize that. We all realize that the role that labor played, whether it's SATU or COSATU or the many other unions that played in that, in collaboration with sister unions here, was an important part of that realization of democracy. But at the same time, democracy is dynamic, right? Dynamic, yeah. In front of democracy. It's changing. As the conditions change, as the dialectics change, it changes as well. So we have to look at that, our growing sense, our sense of changing. It's not a television play. It's not a teleplay. It doesn't have a beginning and an end.
Right.
It has a process that continues on and on, a process that we pass down and pray and hope that those who come after are able to embrace it, to grasp it, and to use it in the same way. And if we don't use it, it atrophies. So when we elected this extraordinary man as president, when we elected him, someone who wanted to make, I believe, in his spirit, in his heart, the real changes. He didn't come out of the same mold. He came out of a different mold, but he wanted to make changes. We had to exercise our capacity to experience democracy even more, or it atrophies, and we become disappointed or disenchanted. But the idea that 4 years in itself allows you to make the changes, the profound changes that need to be changed, in itself is believing or looking at a teleplay. And it doesn't. The idea is that we begin to simply fight for and struggle for the things as others done before us that we may not be able to see. But our capacity to struggle for them, even as we talk about growing our soul, provides the potential and the platform to be able to envision that happen and imagining that happen in the future. But we can't do that if we allow this whole ourselves to atrophy in a way. Now, and when I'm thinking about, when I think about the whole idea of the Catherine Ferguson Academy, and I think about that and how a community finds and generates its own sense of entitlement and importance around that issue, that in itself elevates that whole sense of democracy, growing our souls, and transformation. All those things happen in this end, because now, if that represents for the 20 or more odd years that the Catherine Ferguson Institute has been in existence, and that represents a possibility of, in terms of educating, and it's reinventing the system of education, providing context for the system of education, then we're on to something. And I believe that the attempts to dismantle it was because we were on to something. The attempts to dismantle it were because something much larger was happening, not especially and not exclusively to the school itself, but what was happening with the community that supported the school as well.
That's right.
And Just taking that simple example and magnifying that and extrapolating on that and building on that gives us another sense of what the possibilities are. And the possibilities, I mean, I was on the campaign of Hotel Workers Rising with Unite here in 2005. That's when we began it. We began it in Canada, in Toronto in 2005. It went through most of 2006. And I had never seen anything like it. I mean, if part of my history is that I come out of community development. After I finished university in 1971, I worked in city government for 6.5 years. And it was at an extraordinary point in time in when I turned grassroots democracy. So the communities that I worked in, which were the southeast part of San Francisco, which is Hunters Point, Bayview, and the Hispanic community, the Mission District, were now realizing this extraordinary potential that they had in themselves, in self-governance. And I had seen anything like it, where women and men were able to kind of put their foot down, decide what are the things they thought were best for their communities, and because they had now enhanced their own capacity, they were now challenging governance to look at their situation differently. And so when I see what I've grown to see, coming from a union family and seeing that the evolution of that process has certainly defined most of what I believe is what we're capable of doing. So when I saw the Catherine Ferguson Academy and saw what was happening around the Boggs Center, and the Boggs Center was unlike anything I had seen before because these disparate groups came together under education, under youth violence, restorative justice, food security, environment, development, business development, community development. All those things reminded me a great deal of what I saw when I was working for the city and county of San Francisco in the early 70s. So in that sense, those are the models that we have to draw on. And don't in any way think that those models aren't large enough. Those models allow us to create sustainable movements. And creating sustainable, protracted movements, that's the answers. It's movements that we take down, movements that we pass down from one generation to the next generation, movements that we now bring people in, because it contextualizes our life in a different way. It's real life in real time. And when we have to build our moments, we have to build our movements, around real life and real time.
You know, what we're finding, some of the work Director Rory Gamble is doing is foreclosures. And we're getting members and community and faith groups together to stop these foreclosures that are happening. And what's been great about it is it's changed our membership. Instead of going to talk to them just about, what's happening in the political world or what we got to do to get ready for 2012, they're engaging. And they're seeing that it makes a difference. And what I'm hoping everyone here does is go back and pick an issue in your community that someone's fighting and get membership out there to see what it's like to engage in those kind of fights.
Real movements in real time.
Yeah.
That's what it is. In real life experiences. Often the idea we've dealt with change in philosophical terms. We dealt with change often in ideological terms. But when we deal with real movements in real time, we deal with the capacity, who we are, and what our capacity as human beings in a different way. In a different way. We organize in a different way. We're able to identify the issues in a different way. And we're able to also connect the issues, not philosophically, but in real time. real people's lives.
Well, I want to thank you, Danny, because we are lucky to have you here, and
I'm lucky to be here.
we,
I'm more lucky to be here with you. I'm being serious.
I have to do this on behalf of Director Gamble, because we're going to be inviting you back because we plan to continue to stop these foreclosures in Detroit.
Absolutely.
And so, on behalf of Director Gamble, we'd like you to attend one of those events in the future.
All right.
My director.
What did we say again? I'm going to say this, you lead this. We have no choice. Community or
Chaos.
We all want community. Community or chaos. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.